The Secretary of War's big, bold speech to generals sounded like some real tough guy stances. But is it at odds with actual war? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. We're going to talk about that, plus the fact that some generals are voting with their feet on just what they thought about the Secretary's speech. Let's get into it. Now, first off, why should you listen to me about the reality of war? And the answer is, one, I've been to war. I was a platoon leader in Afghanistan, ran something like 300 or more combat patrols, earned, of course, a combat action badge and a Bronze Star, but also attended graduate school for national security studies at Johns Hopkins. I actually studied under a number of deputy undersecretaries of defense, including Net Assessments Office head Tom Mencken. So I actually have a lot of work around what it means to fight a war and what it means, how we think about how wars are fought in every era. But more importantly, I have been covering the Ukraine war extensively and even been to Ukraine and interviewed dozens of soldiers fighting every day. And I asked them point blank, what does it take to win your war? And I've asked everyone this question, from the two-star general in charge of Ukraine's entire National Guard, all the way down to privates in reconnaissance and drone units. So when I see the secretary, he calls himself the Secretary of War. That is not his name. Legally, it is the Department of Defense, and legally, he is the Secretary of Defense. I see him say these things. It sounds really good. It sounds tough guy, but does it actually have anything to do with fighting the modern war on a modern scale? Let's talk about it. Okay. So I want to juxtapose a couple of things. And what I want to talk about is the fact that the Secretary of War served as a platoon leader no, he never served as a platoon leader. He actually never led troops in combat. He was a civil military liaison officer, sort of organizing councils in Iraq. And then he was a counterinsurgency instructor in Kabul. So the part where he actually leads troops in combat just never really happened. And that's not to denigrate his service, right? It is a noble thing to raise your hand and volunteer to serve. And he was in combat. He has a combat infantryman's badge. So, but the problem is that he stopped there at sort of the warfighter level, and then from there received no additional education, received no additional training, led no additional organizations. In fact, he left government entirely, serving in some kind of, or working as a Bear Stearns analyst and for a time, and then being on a bunch of weird, like politically charged nonprofits before spending 10 years as a Fox and Friends commentator. And so I point this out because, again, the contrast is I spent 10 years at a pretty high level of the federal government doing sort of internal affairs type investigations. And so I got to see in real time how government goes from what the people at the highest levels see and the priorities, and how they turn that into action on the ground. So when you understand that, you see how completely insane the Secretary of War's stances are. So some of these things, he says, listen, we aren't going to do defense anymore. We're going to do war fighting. Let's be generous and call it semantics. I think there actually is a difference because, as he says, defense is something you do all the time. It's reactive, and that's what the U.S. is. We are not a conquering nation. We don't conquer anyone. In fact, the U.S., in terms of overseas territory acquired through acts of war, at least in the last 100 years, we've only asked for enough territory to bury our dead. U.S. overseas territory that have been acquired this century is an acre or two in Normandy, France, to bury Americans that fell in the liberation of the country. So we don't go to war. We're not a conquering nation, and we haven't been, again, for over 100 years. But that semantics aside, let's talk about what he thinks is necessary to win a war. He says, no more toxic ideological garbage. He says that's infected our department, to get rid of the politics. No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. He says no more debris, right? And he frames it as contrasted in common sense. He talks about, would I want my eldest son, who is 15, eventually joining the formations we're currently wielding? If the answer to that is no, or even yes, but, then we're doing something wrong, right? he's like, but what does he ultimately say? He's like, the he says, like, there's going to be high standards. He says standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and very high. If not, they're not standards. They're just suggestions that get our sons and daughters killed. Now that sounds like drill sergeant stuff, but he talks about combat arms units. They're overly sensitive, don't hurt anyone's feelings, leadership, and it ends now, right? Every service will make every requirement for a combat MOS the highest male standard only, right? And what I want to point out is there's a couple of things. First off, that's always been the case. I think he's confusing an Army physical fitness test with the Army combat tests. And the Army did a whole program of this. They actually found that the standards, the actual physical requirements to do the jobs were remarkably low relative to, again, an Army physical fitness test. But so he says, listen, I'm directing, here's the Army physical fitness assessment, the Marine Corps combat fitness test, directing warfighters in combat jobs to execute their service fitness test at a gender neutral, age normed male standard above 70%. This is part of this larger campaign he talks about. He says this, right? You're going to be physically fit. You're not going to be fat. You're going to be not have a beard. He says beards are bad. Beards look bad. But this is the fundamental problem. He also talks about, the Joint Force, we're going to do PT every duty day. Common sense. Most units do it already. We're not talking like hot yoga and stretching, but real hard PT as a unit or as an individual. This is all wrong. I don't love it, right? My own formations, right? My own platoon, I said, no, we're going to have high standards. We're going to be physically fit. We're going to hold ourselves to the Army standard. But zoom out with me for a minute and let's ask some real questions. Let's start with this one. Which side won the war in Afghanistan? You had the U.S. Army, including me, my soldiers, and you had the Taliban. Well, guys, the Taliban won that war. But you may think to yourself, how did they win it? They're the Taliban. And did they do physical fitness training? No. Did they have a uniform? No. Were they clean shaven? No. Were they free of ideology, focused solely on killing? No. In fact, none of those things were true. Were they centralized and committed to physical fitness training? Also, no. This is where you have to sit there and you go, wait, maybe we have some core assumptions about warfighting that are just wrong. Because how did we lose to an organization? And this article lays out a lot of what it meant to be in the Taliban. I interviewed a Taliban commander who said literally they have a massive, wide-ranging recruitment net, right? Where individual commanders have tremendous autonomy to run their formations as they see fit. But crucially, they have a huge amount of effort is put into recruitment. They go to mosques and Quranic lessons to recruit new fighters. But most recruits come from current fighters working to enlist friends and relatives. And even though he says that in his formation, they have close to a 50% casualty rate, the fact that they actually have low standards, easy barriers to entry, keeps fighters signing up to fight. Wait a minute. So you're saying that the Taliban won because they actually lowered recruitment standards? Exactly. But look at the Ukrainian army and the Russian army. Both of those armies have found that it is better for their warfighting effectiveness to have large formations that are easily accessible, in which being overweight, having a lower level of physical fitness, even in some cases having physical or medical challenges are not barriers to entry. Those militaries that, believe it or not, have an easy access to service do better. Why? Because, as the saying goes, quantity has a quality all its own. No, it feels good. It emotionally feels good to be a part of an elite unit. It feels good if you're a commander to see tall, strong soldiers, all in perfect uniform, all clean shaven, all looking sharp. But that is the Russian VDV that tried to take Hostomel Airport. And they got butchered because the Ukrainians, before the Russians did, the Ukrainians mobilized all of their reservists. They mobilized all military able-bodied men. They won the quantity fight. And therefore, and even as Russia won the quality fight. And who came out on top? Well, the answer is the Ukrainians. The Russians were forced out of Hostomel. In fact, their elite armored brigades were forced back from Kiev by a bunch of Ukrainian reservists. But that's critical. It was a bunch of them. So this fundamentally misunderstands a core part of what it means to actually win a war. It's what feels good to a platoon leader, but it's not what allows a military to achieve victory. You're like, Paul, this is insane. Are you saying that soldiers should just have as much beards as they want? Yeah, believe it or not, again, having been to the front lines of Afghanistan and having been to the front lines of Ukraine, yeah, dude, the militaries that have bearded dudes actually have a tremendously high success rate. And the American military that's obsessed with shaving and doing push-ups is actually doesn't have a great track record. Like, this is, and Hegseth, right, says it's like the broken windows theory in policing. If you let small stuff go, the big stuff eventually goes, and you have to address the small stuff. That's not true. That's just not true. That is an antiquated theory in policing, and it's an antiquated theory here. And you point out, he says, this is on duty, in the field and in the rear. If you want a beard, you can join special forces. If not, then shave. Prove to me that beards are essential to warfighting. Show me the link. Show me data. Again, the bearded guys won in Afghanistan. The Ukrainian military and the Russian military don't give one iota of a fuck about beards. And they are the most combat-tested formations in the globe. So again, saying we're going to get back to our roots as the force that lost to the Taliban is not really wowing me here, right? No more shaving profiles. Again, what happens if you need a shaving profile? If you are someone who, if you shave every day, has tremendously huge breakouts of your skin, well, you're going to kick them out, right? And so this is ultimately, what are you going to have? You're going to have under-equipped forces. You're going to have anemic formations, right? So let's take it back to the secretary's own question. Let's say your 15-year-old son's going to get deployed to Ukraine, or your 18-year-old son's going to join a formation in Ukraine, and he has 2 units. One of those units says, we have high standards, but we are going to be holding 3 kilometers of front line with 10 in shape, highly fit, highly motivated, no shaving profile guys. And the other unit says, we're fully manned. We don't have 10 guys. We have 100. And we're going to hold the same kilometers of the front line, same 3K. Which formation are you going to put your kid in? Guess what? It's going to be the 100-man formation. Even in a gunfight, you really, unsupported, not Delta Force against Somali militia, right? But a 10-man unit against a 100-man unit. Even if that 10-man unit is highly physically fit, highly motivated, quantity has a quality all its own. And they are not going to be able to sustain this fight, the fight long enough to win, period. Maybe a 10-man physically fit Ranger level unit, maybe they can fight for 24 hours, 48 hours. But sooner or later, that 100-man unit, they're going to get to sleep. They're going to get to eat. Someone's going to be able to go get another box of ammo while someone else is firing. Quantity. A large army beats a small army, all other things being equal. And all other things don't even have to be equal. A large army beats a small army. That's how the Russians beat the Germans in World War II. Germans, great equipment, great military, great training, tons of experience. But the Soviets had more guys. And more guys equals victory. Again, this would be something, this is the thinking of the graduate level of warfare. This is the thinking that the people at the DASD level think about. Because here's the other thing to remember, is that you build the physical fitness standards around warfighting effectiveness. I don't give a shit if a drone pilot is fit or not. And I can tell you, I've interviewed drone pilots. They themselves don't give a shit if they're fit or not. They go, I'm fit enough to carry my gear to and from position. And then the thing that matters is that they're focused, that they're capable, right? So do you care that they do PT every day? Would you care if the nerd maintaining your Air Force satellites is doing physical training every day? Doesn't matter. How many push-ups they can do is fucking irrelevant. You may not want to hear it, but again, I can tell you, the average Ukrainian soldier defending their country, beating back the Russians, they don't give a shit how many push-ups they can do. Nobody fucking cares. Nobody's doing push-ups. I met one guy, and only because he was a like pan-European Kyokushin karate champion. He was like, dude, I built the whole gym in my base. He was a badass. But he literally was like, none of this is relevant to my job. He's like, it's relevant because I want to be as in shape as possible. And so the fact that he's standing here in front of these generals, all of whom have read these reports and thought about these things at the scale we're talking about, right, is just like just insane. And he's like, Peter, the war doesn't care if you're a man or a woman. Neither does the enemy, nor does the weight of your rucksack, the size of an artillery round, or the body weight of a casualty on the battlefield who carried it. But this is, he literally gets to the point and then still ignores it. Because if war doesn't care if you're a man or a woman, it's true. War doesn't care how physically fit you are. Right? You need, like, people. And when he says, oh, it can't be ideological, guys, fighting for ideology is central. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't love the divisiveness of kind of the everybody, the like, well, the army defends everybody, but it honors this group and that group. Like, if you have enough days honoring certain special identity groups, like, does it enhance esprit de corps? Probably not. But to say that the army is made weaker through ideology is just wrong. The army is made stronger by ideology. And this is the problem, is that, again, the secretary gets close to the point and then misses it. Because the ideology that gives the American military its strength is because we are the good guys. We are not conquerors. We are not invading our neighbors, okay? The American military, we went to Afghanistan. Do you know what we did? First off, we worked tirelessly to protect civilians, right? In a way that no other military does. We built more schools for women and girls. We created more opportunities for women, girls, ethnic minorities in Afghanistan. We protected them. We gave the average Afghan a chance to have a say in who governs their country, right? It's not the rule of whoever has the most AKs wins. These are things that are deeply embedded American values. And don't get me wrong, we probably shouldn't have been there. The Afghan state was and culture was not ready for this, like, Americanization of their values. But it is worth risking your life to say, listen, these people were under an oppressive, theocratic regime, and we are going to give them a chance to build the country that they want. Afghan women and Afghan men, their votes count for the same. That's crazy. Everybody gets to decide what happens in their country. That is a noble thing. And you'll never convince me otherwise. Is that ideological? Yeah, it is. But that's what you risk your life for. That's why the Taliban were willing to take 50% casualties, because they recruited a broad base of people and they said, listen, if you're here for the ideological reasons, you will serve. You will fight. And this reflects conversations I had with Ukrainians. I asked one of their elite recon units, I'm like, what makes a great reconnaissance man? Is it focus? Is it physical fitness? Is it ability? Is it being a good shot? Is it coming up with a good plan? And they said, none of that. He's like, we can fix all of those things. All those things are trainable to a level. He goes, you have to want to be here. If you wake up every day and want to be here, the rest of it will work its way out. We'll get you to everything else. And that's the power of the ideology, right? The Ukrainians can beat the Russians because the Russians are all need to get paid exorbitant sums of money to volunteer to fight and die in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are fighting because they want to live in a country that isn't under Russian dominion. They're fighting for literally the future of Ukraine. So to sit there and go, we're gonna abandon ideology, or we're gonna abandon the things that make America America, and we're gonna focus on killing a lot of people. You're never gonna kill a lot of people, because that isn't a means in and of itself. The means is the most important thing. When you lose that, that's why you have all these Zoomers who are like, I would never sign up for the military. And it's like, yeah, because you don't have to. Because no one is articulating the way American values are under threat. No one's explaining that a capable, fully staffed military is the thing that keeps China out from killing millions of Taiwanese. It's the thing that was supposed to keep the Russian military from steamrolling into Ukraine or from bombing Krakow, right? It's the thing that keeps the world's dictators at bay. But we ourselves don't articulate that, because we don't even do it. What do we use the military to do? Bomb a bunch of fishing boats in Venezuela? We use it to threaten Greenland? This is such a fundamental misunderstanding. And the fact is that I'm not alone in seeing this, okay? The Air Force's top general, right? This is somebody, by the way, resigned, by the way, just a few hours ago. And it says after Hegseth's partisan speech. I think he probably resigned after hearing what the president was threatening to do, go to war with Americans. He was like, I'm not going to be a part of this. But I want you to understand, General Thomas Bussier actually has retired. He says, this is after much reflection with a full heart, Barb and I made the difficult decision to request retirement from the United States Air Force for personal and family reasons, which is, I'm going to talk about why I think that's what he said in a second, right? He says, I'm deeply honored to have been nominated for Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force and profoundly grateful for the trust and confidence placed in me by the President. So I want you to understand, this is someone who was given a massive promotion, a huge career-making promotion, and he declined it. This is someone who has spent 30 plus years in uniform, rising up the ranks. This is somebody who could have left the service a decade ago and gotten a full retirement, a full pension, and he still stuck around. Something stuck him around. And then he gets his final, ultimate, one of the most prestige assignments to really build out an Air Force that he believes in and sees, and he's told, and he instead is walking away, right? And he drops one more line that I think is really interesting. So let's see if I can find it. He says, I look forward to finding new ways to support our Air Force, our national defense, and the incredible people who make it possible. Well, wait, that's interesting, because Pete Hegseth said, we don't do defense anymore. We go to war with people. And this, the reason, one, the timing is obvious. The timing couldn't be more obvious. He got told, if you don't believe in this message, in this mission, resign. And he said, yeah, I don't believe in it. And I really think that it wasn't about like the patronizing kind of SecDef thing. I think it was actually a reflection of being told by the president, hey, I'm going to send you to war against Americans. And he was like, I won't. But what I think the inclusion of, again, defense is the dig there. But I really think that this is a function of this misunderstanding of what it means to fight and win as not just a military, but the American military, the force on planet Earth that fights for and defends free countries, free people, right? People who hold elections, who get to decide who runs who their government is. The Russians don't get that. The Chinese don't get it. North Koreans don't get it. Iranians don't get it. But the French do, the Spanish do, the UK does. All of our allies, the Japanese, the South Koreans, all of our allies have this in common. And the US military represents those values defended. Literally, US everywhere, autocracy is trying to advance. The US military stands in the way, providing gear, targets, and training to the Ukrainians. right? Providing mentorship and literal brigades of combat troops on this DMZ in South Korea, right? Shooting down Iranian ballistic missiles. Everywhere these countries try to expand the influence of these autocratic systems, the US military stands on the other side of it. And the fact that that value is just put in the paper shredder by our own Secretary of Defense and by our own president is like fills me with disgust. Anyway, this has gone on long enough. Thank you to Sergei Zinchenko, Alan Knudsen, Alfred Chesky, AL90, James Poor, Steve Moran, and all of our lieutenant tier folks. Again, if you want to support me on Combat Vet News, it makes a huge difference. You get access to exclusive videos, including stuff sent to me by units on the front lines. And of course, if you don't want to be publicly associated with me because I'm a critic of the administration, you can support me anonymously. You just got to send us an email. So links in the description. Thanks. See ya.